Good afternoon, we're at the Mount House Ways and Means Committee. It's February 19th, 2026. And Chair Kornheiser will be with us in a few minutes. We're going to get started on an act relating to creating non-homestead residential tax classifications. Is Robert here? Jake Feldman.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Find the Zoom link so I can start. Uh, I'll just kind of, Jake Feldman, Tax Department. And I will say that Kirby sent over draft 2.2 of the bill which is posted on your website. And we didn't quite have time to fully digest it all. So my testimony is on draft 2.1, which is very similar. I think we can speak to the changes in 2.2, but we just got them maybe 45 minutes ago. So there's a little bit of funniness there. And usually I'm already connected to Zoom, so I'm like more ready, but
There you go.
okay. Yeah. So I have a short PDF that Sorcia put, I think, under my name. Possibly. Does that make?
You yourself.
Oh, okay, got it. Sorry. That's under my name on the committee page. And it's the PDF version of what I'm about to show. Am I sharing my screen? No, I'm not sharing my screen. Sorry. A little bit slow right now. There we go. Okay, great. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're responding to draft 2.1, but 2.2 is mostly similar. And Abby Shepard, who's our executive policy advisor and is a lawyer, is online, and she can help with this definition of employee housing, which our understanding is that the committee would like to consider that like a long-term rental arrangement, so not have it be taxed as a second home. You know, if UVMMC has some housing that they're providing to their employees as part of working, or a farmer, you know, has housing. So Abby and Kirby have been kind of going back and forth on a definition for that, and they can speak to that in a second. That's a little bit beyond me. I do have a couple things about just defining the non-homestead residential tax base. Again, we do think that at least at first, commercial apartments should be excluded. And I'm gonna explain why in a few minutes. And then we had another question for the committee, where the department kind of needs some clarification on how land value would be apportioned, which you've been talking about. And then I'm going to talk about penalties a little bit. Going to talk about the timing of this new form, which would replace the homestead declaration and be even more encompassing. It'd be like, if it's your homestead, or anybody who has between 1 and 4 dwellings has to fill it out. We're gonna talk about why we think that should start in 2028, not 2027. And then this last point, I don't have any slides on it, but in Act 73, there were a few contingencies that were put in place to make the new tax, contingent on some things happening. There were 3 of them, and it looks like all 3 are back in version 2.2, so we appreciate that. The big picture there is that, as you can probably imagine, the administration is reluctant to add new revenue to the ed fund. So this was part of like a grand bargain. It's like, if these other things can be put in place, then the second homes tax could happen too. And a little detail from me is that it is definitely strategic to have all the tax provisions in the bill happen at the same time and not different times. Because if you started the second homes tax a year before the other things, you might get a situation where all of a sudden people's taxes go down and then the following year they go up. And that is problematic. Whereas if the things are starting at the same time, they can be used to offset each other. So we hope that continues to be the case on timing, where the whole package starts in the same time.
So, Representative Wozniak has a question.
Yeah, so from I appreciate the frankly political points that you just brought up around Act 73 and the grand bargain and the reluctance of the administration to go forward with tax classifications. But I feel like in some areas from the tax department, we're hearing, slow it down, walk, don't run. And then in this case, we're saying, save everything so it all changes at once. And I feel like those 2 things are in conflict. And like for the regional assessment districts, right, we're having a conversation about should they be tied to new school district boundaries? But I don't see any practical reason why we need to delay the tax classifications to increase taxes on second homes, which is something we hear about all of the time from constituents. Are there any practical reasons outside of the political grand bargain of Act 73 why we shouldn't go forward any faster?
Yeah, I mean, it's discussed in the second part of the report on second homes, which I know you read. Thank you. So, it's like, I think it's looking like in Act 73, you're going to have communities that could potentially have a higher homestead tax rate than they do now. And those would be like lower spending communities, because in Act 73, it's imagining like a uniform tax rate around the state. And it also has a homestead exemption. So I guess what I maybe didn't say clearly before is like, if you introduce the second homes tax first, you could have a year with a bunch of new revenue, which could make people's taxes go down. But then the following year, you'd be potentially upping that low spending community onto this higher track, and then they go back up. So that feels like it could be problematic. So I think there is an opportunity to kind of smooth everything out at once.
Yeah, and I think we've all been very clear that one of the reasons we're moving in this direction is to provide stability to our property. But we already don't have that stability now. So I don't, it's definitely a fair concern, but we already don't have that stability. So when we have the opportunity to capture some new revenues from second homeowners to reduce the taxes of those who are primary residents filing homestead declarations, I think we should be moving in that direction as fast as possible. Thank you.
Representative Odie.
No, go ahead. I heard the beginning of what you said, that new revenues from second home taxes would come in the first year. If we changed this before 73 would come in. But what was the second part of that?
So adding revenue to the ed fund could lower people's taxes, right? So you might get a low spending community, say it's Berry City, Berrytown, at $1.10. If you just pump in a bunch of new revenue to the ed fund, maybe their tax rate goes to, 90 cents or whatever. So it would go down a bunch in that year. But then the following year, the Act 73 homestead rate would end up potentially higher, so they would go back up.
Why do you think it would be potentially higher?
Because I mean, it's unclear exactly what it would be, but it's going to be a new landscape where everyone in the state has the same base homestead rate. This is what was passed in Act 73. So, and that base rate could, when we looked at it for FY25, it would have been around $1.30. So there, it is getting a bit technical, but there's all these moving pieces. And so I think from a besides the political point, which is not my main, forte, there may be some like financial fiscal reasons to have them happen together.
Representative Holcomb, you have a question?
I'll actually just hold right there. My last question, would we get testimony about that, whether that's, what the numbers are on that, possibly? But the numbers. This isn't the numbers, this is the policy.
Good question. We'll take a note of
Thank you.
Okay, so on that note, we're going to talk about this definition of employee housing. And Abby Shepherd, I think, is online, and it gets kind of in the legal realm. So I'm going to hand it over to her.
Yes, I'm here. Thanks, Jake. I hope everyone can hear me. My name is Abby Shepherd. I'm the Executive Policy Advisor at the Department of Taxes. And thank you for letting me jump in on this really quickly. I have been emailing with Kirby because I see there is a new draft. So this presentation that we put together actually responds to the draft that was shown previously and is now a little outdated. But just to sort of give you the overview of why we were suggesting a change. Our understanding, we appreciate the committee taking up one of the recommendations in our report to address farm worker housing and to look at employee housing more generally for the second homes classification. When we were looking at the definition that was drafted in the previous draft, we noticed that it wasn't linking in any way to the housing being provided by the employer. The new draft that is posted under Kirby's name does address that. So we're happy to see that that's explicit. The other concern we'd had is that the previous draft didn't link in any way to current use. So we thought it would just be simpler to make the definition really succinct and just say it's employee housing, meaning a dwelling used by an employer to house the employer's employees. It would be that 6-month requirement, like for all other long-term housing, doesn't need to be consecutive. And it would be a farm employee as defined under Title IX. That is a definition that current use uses for farm worker housing to determine if farm buildings are eligible for current use. But regardless of any connection to the current use requirements, this would be a new definition. So we wouldn't be really looking at any of our current use enrollment data. So hopefully that makes sense to just simplify it and make it a little bit more succinct. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about how current use currently treats farm worker housing as well.
Abby, it's Charlie Kimball. Perhaps you could just briefly go over that, how current use currently treats farm worker housing. That would be helpful.
Great. So under current statute, there is a reference to this Title IX farm worker or farm employee and farm employee housing. But the treatment currently is that as long as a farm worker housing is used for a 12-month period as farm worker housing, then it can be treated as a farm building for current use purposes, and farm buildings are valued at $0. So if there is a farm building enrolled in current use, it's already not being taxed. So just to make you aware, there is already that treatment. So whether the classification is as a non-homestead residential or as a non-homestead non-residential, it would not be taxed under current statute and overlaying this classification structure. So our concern here is regardless of that existing treatment, what's being created for the classifications has a different level of condition there. It's a little more open. So we wouldn't be looking at current use to make these determinations.
is it your opinion then that we should be silent in this draft on farm employee? Because it's already covered under current use?
That would certainly be a different policy direction. My understanding is you were looking more at employee housing in general and trying to include that as a type of long-term rental. And then when you dug into that, Kirby had flagged that farm workers aren't required to have unemployment insurance reported for them, so they needed kind of a separate treatment to be called out there. So that's why I got a little more weedy and went down these other sort of rabbit holes.
There are also farms that don't use current use.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Abby, and
Mhm.
hi, sorry I was late. I was saying that there are farms that do not enroll in current use.
Correct. So that's also why we were suggesting let's not try and use current use here. This is sort of a different definition altogether. And we had sent some updated language. This here was talking about the current draft doesn't leverage, doesn't speak to the housing being provided by employer, but we see that the new draft is updated to include that language. So we'd be happy to send an updated version for your consideration.
Thank you.
And thanks for letting me be remote. I apologize for the not being able to be there in person.
I mean, it's fine to be remote. And if it makes you feel any better, you're very, very tiny on the screen because of the screen share, so.
Great.
Hi, Jake.
Hi,
Where were we?
where were
Do
we?
you have more to say?
A few more things, yeah.
Great.
Okay. So let's see, it sounds like, the employee housing is coalescing, which is great. The point that I brought up in the report, and also I think maybe a couple times when I was here earlier, is that the department is recommending that at least at first, commercial apartments are excluded. So that commercial apartments already are separated out in the grand list, and that's apartment building with it should say 5+, not 4+, but it's 5 or more dwelling units. And so the reasons that we think, at least at first, commercial apartments should be excluded are that we have data that about 2,000 apartments in the state are short-term rentals. And the question is, how many of those are actually in these bigger apartment buildings? We know like Burlington doesn't even allow it. And of those that are in the bigger apartment buildings, what share of the tax base is it? So the question is, is the juice worth the squeeze here? It's going to be a pretty small population, probably, of dwelling units. It would definitely represent a significant increase in the work for local officials to identify these apartments. And they would have to know, and they don't currently, they would need to have the apartment's number and its square footage. So this is like a major new item. And it's part of that phase 1 of implementation. So we think that it would be quite a bit of work. And then with regards to this.
Sorry, Jake, by quite a bit of work for you, for the landlord,
Local officials.
local officials. Okay, thank you. Okay.
But Tom, I mean, perhaps Representative Higley can answer this, but on the Lister card currently, isn't the square footage for apartments already broken out?
And we do have the listers joining us for
Okay.
testimony.
Yeah, that's a good question for them.
Data's there, but.
Yeah. They're also gonna need to know the apartment number, which I don't think they have. So like, because remember, this is relying on landlords filing a dwelling use attestation. And if a landlord says, apartment number 12, I rent short term, the town needs to know which one is apartment number 12, right? Otherwise, they can't put the right square footage, they can't do the apportioning correctly. So there's a lot of work there. And as far as like dwelling use attestation, this means that a landlord of a bigger building would potentially have to go through all their units and, check the boxes. So it's going to be a lot of work on that end too. So the question really is the juice worth the squeeze at this point, trying to get this thing off the ground? Okay. A question that we are pondering, or we may need some clarification on is, in the draft, it says that, in mixed use cases, to apportion the land value based on the square footage. Well, is that total square feet or finished square feet?
Such a fun question.
A fun question and a good question for Vala. We think that it's possible that only the second thing, finished square feet, is available and reliable. We do know that that is tracked, but not total square feet. Like if you think of like really awesome second home in Stowe, 5,000 square feet. But then it's got a
A horse barn?
yes, an
Horse
unfinished
barn example.
horse
Like the theme of the.
indoor equestrian rink.
Yeah.
Which is, let's see, 15,000 square feet. So what do you do with the land value in that case? If you did it based on total square feet, and if the town knew that the equestrian indoor thing was 15,000 square feet, then it would be 3/4 goes to non-homestead, non-residential, and 1/4 goes to non-homestead residential because of the house. But if you did it based on finished square feet only, it would be 100% of the land value would go to non-homestead residential. So that is something to clarify.
Representative.
June, I mean, have we really decided? I know that we talked, but I didn't know that we had actually decided that that's what we were gonna do.
I don't think we've decided anything at all, Representative Higley.
Because
Certainly
again,
the trend.
my input on that would be just keep all the land, regardless whether it's got an Airbnb in it. The example that we used last time was a bakery and the Airbnb, 25%, 75. I mean, to me, as a lister, just use a whole acreage as non-residential. Not break it out, non-homestead residential. Anyway.
Appreciate that.
Just, I mean, I don't know. Is there any way, Jake, to possibly, no, it wouldn't be. I was gonna say the difference in the amount of money that it would be statewide for in breaking that out. I mean,
It's really hard to do estimating on this right now because the data doesn't really exist. So, not in any good way.
Yeah.
We have thought about that, what I think what you're saying, and my question, sort of playing devil's advocate, is if you had a second homeowner who knew that their land value could go all to non-homestead, non-residential, if there was a commercial component on the land, would they say, hey, I've got this little, small shack of some kind and I use it for whatever, it's a pottery studio, I don't know, it's tiny. And would they say, this is a non-homestead, non-residential building, and so that means my entire land should be taxed non-homestead, non-residential? Would it be like a loophole?
And the scale of some of the properties we're talking about is pretty extraordinary. So it's not, sometimes I don't think it's minor detail either. Yeah. Representative Holcomb, you had? Okay.
Okay, let's see. We looked at the draft and we were thinking about what the right penalty levels are. Right now, as written, it's 100% penalty, which makes it sound like you take whatever you owe and double it, maybe. But maybe the penalty should be smaller in the first year of implementation, and maybe get bigger. And also maybe the heaviest penalty should be in cases of, like, real cases of fraud. By the way, fraud fraud is really hard to prove. Whereas I think what you're gonna get is a ton of just regular mess ups. You're gonna have landlords who don't really know what they need to do, and they're gonna not fill out the dwelling use attestation. And so the question is, do you wanna really penalize them, or do you wanna kind of ease into it? There's gonna be a lot of that. Even just a few years ago, when we did renter credit reform in 2018 or 19, whatever that was, we made it so that landlords had to file if they had just one dwelling unit, whereas before it had been two. And all these landlords were like, what the heck is this? You know, we didn't know that we had to file it, and what are you doing to us? And so that's just like a minor, case. But this is, a significant tax difference. And so, yeah, I would recommend, like, kind of easing into the penalties and maybe separating out fraud. If the tax department can really prove it, as the worst penalty. And then I drew a crude picture.
I'm really excited about the picture. Don't want to get distracted by it for a second. How does this compare to other penalties for similar things at tax?
There's penalties on the books for homestead, like
Yeah,
homestead, non-homestead,
do you have any sense of how often they're?
rarely, very rarely. Yeah, and it's a bit messy. And so, in this new 3 classification environment with potentially much different tax rates, there could be way more of this activity. There's a question about how would data be shared between the tax department and towns, because in the draft, it has towns assessing the penalties. So remember, Vermont has this bizarro isosceles triangle that doesn't exist in other states, where taxpayers report their homesteads to the tax department, and then the tax department tells the town, and then the town sends the bill. In other states, you interact straight with it's usually your county assessing office to do this stuff. So we have this inefficient isosceles triangle. So it's possible, it's likely that once the year is over, the tax department will be in possession of data on apartments that weren't rented out long-term. I think we could detect those. And homes that, where the person said they were going to be a homestead, but they didn't end up being a homestead. So maybe the tax department can know that, but it's going to be the towns who have all the tax bill details. So, there's a question of whether the tax department should do the penalties or the town should. I think as I thought about it at lunch, I think the way it would have to be is like the tax department sends a file to the town that says, here are some spans where we think, this was not right. And then the town would have to do some penalizing at that point. But it's a little bit funny with the loop of information.
Isn't this a challenge under current law?
Yeah, but it's only for homestead, non-homestead,
Yeah.
and there's very little of this activity.
So how do you handle it?
Towns, yeah, I'm not an expert on this, so I know what I've heard, but I think towns try to tell us sometimes that they think that some property is not a homestead, and then we maybe investigate to some extent. We do a little bit of auditing at the end to try to, at the end of the year, to try to detect homesteads who weren't really homesteads. But in a lot of cases, it's there's legitimate reasons for whatever happened, or they forgot to withdraw their homestead declaration. But there's really not much of this.
Are you saying that we need further clarify the statutory language on this?
I'm not sure on this, as I thought about it, because it says in the bill, towns are gonna assess the penalties, and I was thinking about, well, who really should assess? the
Okay,
penalties?
thank you.
I think it could be towns, but I think
But it might make more sense for the state,
maybe the state should be doing the fraud.
Okay.
I'm not really sure, but But I'm just trying to think about how this is gonna work for us operationally. It could be that we have to send towns a file or something. Okay, so we,
Sorry, one more question, Jake. When do you think you'll feel clearer on how you think it should work?
soon. Maybe, yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, there's a lot of thinking
I know,
happening.
I agree. There's a lot of thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
You said soon.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, next week.
Okay, okay, thanks.
Okay. So we would like the new dwelling use attestation, which is an important form in this process, to start in 2028, not 2027. Here's why. This is a big change, and we are going to need some time to do outreach during 2027 about the new requirements. We're going to have to develop this form, and we're also going to have to build the background information technology to kind of handle all the data. So I'm not sure that it can even happen between, May and January of next year. So that's one reason. As you guys have drafted here, the 2027 grand list is going to have dwelling unit counts, which is a new thing. And so that means that tax or towns can go ahead and contact the owners who have dwelling units and say, this is what you need to do in 2028. But if you require it in 2027, there's no way to reach out to them and say, this is what you need to do. So, you'd have to like kind of take a guess at it. It just wouldn't be very, very clean. If it did start in 2027, it would be pretty confusing to taxpayers to have to do a new form that is what we call in the tax world informational, meaning it doesn't matter. So it would only be used to try to like get a sense of what the tax base is. It doesn't have any real purpose.
That seems like a real purpose, Jake.
But it's unusual. Like I'm not sure.
It is unusual.
So that's I think we would get a lot of calls on that. And then without these other things in place, like the outreach and the dwelling identification and the IT system, I don't think the data collected in 2027 would even be particularly high quality.
So if we were going to move from this problem statement to a solution, if you develop the forms in 27, we collect the forms in 28, we then set the base in 29 and apply it for 30?
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
the new classification should start when the new funding formula starts,
Or should?
which currently is contemplated for FY 29.
I know, that's why I'm,
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think so as far as providing data for JFO and setting the base, I don't see a major improvement by collecting it 1 year earlier. It's not going to be very high quality. If we did it on this timeline, like getting it for 2028, like we can still get a good estimate of it. That is like using landlord certificates to kind of work backwards. I think like the apartments and the mixed use cases are going to be kind of a lesser component of it. So I think it would be worth it to wait. Yeah.
Yes, we also talk about, yeah, if we did it in 2027, it wouldn't be the best data, but it would still be more data than we have now. And I know we talk a lot about taxpayer behavior too. So I think that the first year rollout of pretty much anything is going to be a little bit messy the first time you do it. So I think that there is some merit to starting it earlier so that the taxpayers can get used to filling out the forms that they're going to have to fill out.
Potentially, we're going to wonder what it's for.
I think most normal people who aren't in this every day think they fill out a bunch of useless paperwork already.
Yeah. My other points are there is a real computer aspect of what we need to do.
Mhm.
And in an ideal world, the tax department would do like a full outreach and even contacting individual parcel owners saying like, hey, we know that you have between 1 and 4 dwellings, so you need to make sure to file this form. That would be ideal, rather than it's just kind of dropping.
And I'm not pushing back on the need for the extra year. I'm more just sort of wondering how the extra year fits into the other pieces of the timeline in your imagination.
I think if FY 29 is the target date for the package, then I think that it could still work very well and maybe even better with the extra year on the dwelling use attestation.
Representative
Teddy, at a break, I want to tell you about getting people used to something. You'll find it amusing. It is relevant to this, but not.
Okay. Okay.
But I appreciate the idea, you know.
Back to you, Jake.
That might be it.
Okay. Thanks. Are you gonna hang out for,
Yeah, of course.
I don't want to keep you from your other work too much too. You're used to us, though. Thank you.
Yeah, my budget.
Robert Vickery, hello, inside the computer.
I'm gonna all right, how's that? Is that better?
Nice to see you again.
Nice to
Not as
see
good an
you.
angle as yesterday, but
Well,
probably more comfortable for you.
yeah, my camera's a little low. We actually we were planning on coming down, but we kind of got sidetracked, and then I didn't realize it was 1 o'clock, 1:15. I thought it was 3. So
We're glad you're here. It's no problem, and I'm sorry for the trouble.
well, no, luckily Sorsha was able to email me, and but thank you for having me, and I represent Vala. I really appreciate you reaching out to us and having us here. And again, I apologize for not being 100% prepared, but just tell you what's going on. We are in the middle of a reappraisal here in Colchester, and I've got values coming in, and I've got the head appraisers coming in and out of my office all week this week and last week and next week. So, because they're doing a review, so we're right in the thick of it right now. So just to start, when this first was brought out, Vala had some concerns with how assessing would work. And we were concerned that we would have to change the assessment practices for different properties based on the use of the property as opposed to the highest and best use of the property, which is how we want to be valuing the property as a benchmark for a fair and equity. So what we did was we looked at what was just released. I believe the draft we have is 1.5. So I will go right through that, similar to what we did yesterday. And the first thing we were concerned with is the actual grand list in the room on the grand list when we're looking at listing all the buildings on the grand list. I believe the draft right now says listing the number of dwellings. And I'm not sure if that is, if there's 10 dwellings, you just list 10, or if you list each individual building and the use of the building, or the percentage of the use of the building. I don't know how that would work. So right now we have certain things we have to put on the grand list: owner name, parcel span number, brief description, which would include building and acreage, homestead house site, and real value have to be put on the grand list. And that leaves a certain amount of room per list. And one of the reasons we have concern of this is that we have to create a hard copy of the grand list and record it in the town land records, which goes into the vault and is there forever. And so we have these grand list books that are stored in the town vault for every year that we've been running a grand list. So as we increase the amount of data that we have per parcel on that grand list, we would actually be increasing the size of the book. So there is some concern about that. I know right now it doesn't seem like a lot, but given 10 years and you're increasing that size by X percentage of the size of the book, it does take up
Is that
space.
called book?
Yep. Yeah, the
Okay,
grand list,
cool.
it's here in Colchester, we actually have these file holders that hold the grand list. I'm not sure how many other towns have it like what we do, but it is a substantial clump pile of papers that are all connected and run as a full grand list. And those have to be kept forever according to statute. So we are concerned about the size of data that are in that is in that book and taking up that space. So that is one concern we have. Let's see. The other concern we have is we run the grand list using NIMRIC. Most towns do, I believe, when they print the grand list. This would mean that NIMRIC would have to make some changes to the software as far as the export data to that printing to include all the buildings and the building uses and how they're categorized. The other thing that has come up is the definition of parcel and contiguous parcels. With this particular revision of the bill, VALA has always maintained, and we've advocated for years now to not have contiguous parcels under one ownership, to put those on the grand list as separate listings. There's several reasons for that. The first reason is it's confusing to property owners. Not all towns actually list one listing for contiguous parcels. We have many subdivisions in some towns, like for instance, Colchester, where we'd have to list, say it's a subdivision of 50 properties. We have one listing, one tax bill. Every time one of those lots sell, we have to prorate those taxes, and then the developer has to charge that property owner the difference in taxes. And it can get quite confusing if you've got a 50 lot subdivision and 6 lots sell one year, the next year another 6 lots. So you're constantly adjusting how that's just distributed between the buyer and the seller and what they're paying in taxes, and it makes it very confusing. We end up getting a lot of calls that way. So it's much easier for subdivisions to list each individual lot out separately, even though they're under one ownership. That's one reason. The other reason would be you could have contiguous parcels, and each parcel could have different highest and best use, which would mean that you're approaching the valuation differently for each one. If you have them all under one grand list parcel, that could have an effect and in what you're assessing that property for. So
Can I ask you a question about that?
sure.
This is a concern and request you have with regards to current law as well?
Yeah, so in this particular draft, which is part of the current law, the definition of parcel means all contiguous land under the same ownership.
Yep. And you're saying that like, even if we did nothing else, you would want that changed?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding you.
And
Thank you.
right now, this is how it was explained to me. One of the reasons why is because current use, when you have a farm, they have multiple lots on the farm, they do one current use application. And so those get combined for the current use. And I don't have a problem keeping that way, but for us, it makes more sense to have each parcel being individual lots as they're subdivided and as they're deeded, as opposed to having multiple parcels under one ownership on the grand list. So that's was just in this language here, so we thought I should bring it up. So the establishment of the grand list to include one or more tax classifications for each parcel. Again, one thing that we were concerned with is when you classify different parts of the parcel separately, based on the use and not the highest and best use. We were concerned with how that's going to affect the valuation process. Typically we look at the highest and best use of a parcel, not the property owner's intended use or what they're actually using the property for. We want to look at a straight benchmark for everybody.
We've been trying to be quite clear through this entire process that these are two separate
Yeah,
things.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
and have no intention of interfering with the actual valuation of property. Yeah.
So one thing, trying to catch where I'm having. So we do agree with, and we do think if this is something that's going to move forward, that we should be having the tax department, people, when they fill out their homestead, making that filing with the tax department. The reason is I don't believe the municipalities have the capacity to actually go out and collect this information and make a determination on how a property is being used. So we do agree that it should be sent to the tax department and when people file their homestead, how that's going to be worked, how that's going to be, the tax department's going to notify people that they have to do this now. That's the tax department's what they're going to have to do, but Valid believes that municipalities do not have the capacity to actually go out and collect this property information. And that we would want the state to tell us how they're being filed by the property owner. I think it's hard enough for us to get into properties anyway. And people don't want us coming around as it is. So if the tax department can collect that information, that's great. The next issue I think we're concerned with is the tax billing and how that's gonna fill out. Currently we have on the tax billing two different columns, one for homestead and one for non-homestead. We have columns or rows for current use, the currently use allocation and veterans exemptions. This would add a column. I can tell you that many property owners get confused by this. We also have some confusion when we download information from VTPI into the tax billing software, which is NIMRIC, and send those off to the printer. Not all the information gets through. There could be an issue in the process of the person who's doing the downloading. There could be an issue with the data being converted or being sent across. Where we have errors. I can tell you that just as an example, just 2 weeks ago, we had a person who owns a farm here in town come in and they were doing their income taxes. They wanted to know what the value was or the taxes were for their apartment house. And he brought his tax bill in. The tax bill was not allocated correctly. That could have been an error on our side. With loading the information. When I went into the VTPI, the state software, it was correct and it didn't match what was on his tax bill. So when we add layers to this, we need to be aware that there's a possibility that this is going to add greater chance of error on the tax bills. We did go through and it took us about an hour to figure it out, and we were able to generate a new tax bill, which saved him about $2 a year in taxes. So that was nice.
I think we have Representative Maslin.
Yeah, yes, sir. You said the error that you uncovered recently, was that having to do with the software or stuff entered incorrectly? And is it a big deal? You said it was only $2 a year or something to that effect.
Yeah, for this error, it was only $2 a year. I can tell you that in VT Pi, it was entered correctly because I could go into the software and look at it and see it correctly. Done. The tax bill that was printed did not print off the correct allocation. So there could have been an error in the data being pulled from VT Pi into the tax billing software. There could have been it could have been that the tax bill he was showing me was earlier tax bill from it was mailed out in July. And he didn't have the most updated tax bill. So
Right.
it could have been any number of things that could have happened in that process.
So
But
are you aware that, sorry, I'm cutting in, that happens very often or just once in a while? What's the incidence of error such as that?
I couldn't tell you, and I wish I knew off the top of my head the number of revised tax bills we send out per year. But we do send out quite a few, and we ran a report after we found that error, and we found 9 other tax bills that were whether the download didn't come through but had the same error. So there was 9, and we have 7,300 parcels in Colchester, so 9 out of 7,300 is not bad. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
So that's a concern, is that the confusion of the tax bills and potential errors on the tax bills. The other question I had or concerns we had has to do with the percentage of the underlying land. From my understanding, if a parcel has 30% short-term rental and 70% commercial use, the tax on 30% of the land would be separated out, and tax on the 70% of the land would have a different tax rate, the commercial tax rate. I'm not sure how that would work with the land scheduling that we use. Typically land values in Vermont are done on land schedule, which is based on economies of scale. The first acre is typically the highest valued, and then the acres go down in value past that.
Can I interrupt you for a second
Sure.
to sort of clarify in order to clarify the terms in order for your question to maybe
Yeah,
work? I think in the context of this legislation, we're not looking at value, we're not looking at changing value at all. We're just looking at changing rates.
right,
Okay,
right.
so
So
the property can be valued in any way whatsoever, totally separate from the rates that are applied.
okay, so my question or my concern is when you're looking at the land value, you have a 2-acre house site value and then the rest of the land. Are we separating out 30% of the 2 acres and the rest of the land, or are we just dividing that total land value by 1/3 or 30% and 70% on the tax bill?
I believe it's the latter.
So it would be the entire land value would be divided
Indeed.
for the tax rates. Okay. All right, so that was a concern we had. We weren't sure if it was going to be the end of the land, beginning of or the overall. So then we can look at concerns with use value. We understand that it's not going to affect the use value at all. But one thing we're looking at, or one thing that has been brought up and that we're concerned with, is the purpose of current use is to keep land open and working. And if we're going to be applying a higher tax rate because a farmer has Airbnb on their property and they're going to get a higher tax rate, we're just concerned that that might defeat the purpose of current use to keep the land working and open. So that's another concern that we just want to have raised and to think about. And one thing that we were wondering, and I know that it talks about mobile homes, is actually travel trailers. The state statute is if the travel trailer is on a site for more than 180 days, it gets taxed as real estate. There is a lot of travel trailers that are considered personal property. If somebody's renting that out in a short-term rental, are they including that in the square footage of the overall square footage? If it's personal property? That's a concern we had. Some towns assess yurts or other temporary structures that are rented out. Colchester does not.
Some towns do and some towns don't.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So here in Colchester, we don't assess yurts. We believe it's personal property. We do look at the structure that's attached to the ground. So if it's a poured slab or a deck, we would assess the deck, but not the actual yurt. Considering the canvas to be a temporary structure. So some towns do assess that, and if they're leasing that out or renting that on a short-term rental, how does that affect the percentage of square footage on the total property? I guess that's a concern we have. So if you've got a farm and you've got 2 yurts on the property, and do you add up the 2 square footage of the yurts? And that becomes,
I think in our thinking, it wouldn't fit the definition of dwelling. If it isn't habitable 365 days a year. So if
okay,
it's a temporary structure like a yurt, then it wouldn't be included for tax
You
classification.
can heat and plumbing here.
I know you can heat and plumbing here, so at that point, it would be a dwelling.
Indeed it would.
okay. So that actually,
A lot of yurts are full-time residents.
And we definitely, that's a good index card. Sorry, back to you, Robert.
and that actually brings up another question, seasonal rentals or seasonal camps. How does that fit into the definition currently?
They don't count as dwellings, so they're very
Okay.
explicitly excluded from.
All right. All right, so that's good, and I guess that brings us to our concerns. I think, we're just concerned at how that's land value is going to be separated out as far as, but it seems to me that you've looked at that. And then the implementation of software and how that's going to work. And how we're going to adjust for that. Right now we do homestead house sites. So it would be an added layer to that. And then the actual room on the grand list and the tax bills and how it's going to fit into a tax bill.
Thank you.
Well, can I ask you a couple questions? On the Lister cards, it's not the same as the grand list, which you print out, but on the Lister card, if you have an apartment building that is 4 units, what level of detail do you have on the 4 units on the Lister card?
That's a good question. We don't separate out the square footage per unit. We look at, so if it's a 4,000 square foot building of livable space and you've got 4 units and each unit's 1,000 square foot, we don't put that on the Lister card. We don't break it down that kind of detail. We have the entire building as far as living space and gross space is how we would do it. I don't know if that's the case with other municipalities. Our software doesn't allow us to necessarily break down per unit.
Interesting, okay, because then just thinking about the databases maintained by fire departments that have separate units as on their 911 listing, that doesn't mesh with yours necessarily.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and if we do break down, say, warehouse space and office space. So if you have a warehouse and the X square footage of office space in that, we do break that down because we want to assess those different spaces at a different rate. But for apartments, we do not break the individual units down.
Okay, and also by number, then you wouldn't do that. 4 units, 1A, 1B.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
A second question is just in terms of room, you're talking about a room in your land records. If all that additional data had to be printed out and then reported. Could you talk about the state of digitization in your own land records and just trying to create more digitization of land records so you didn't have to record everything in the paper records?
Yeah, Colchester is very good. The prior town clerk, we actually hired people and she was very forward in thinking about getting everything scanned and recorded and getting them on a searchable base where people can search for land records at home. And that happened a long time ago, which was one of the first towns in the state to do that. I believe the statutes are that we still have to keep the paper records for the grand list, for the deeds. So you still have to have that paper record. And as far as our lister records, we do keep paper copies. I'm not sure whether we need to keep it whether paper copy or we can keep it digital. We do both here in Colchester. We have a digital copy of the lister records as well as paper copies.
Yeah, it just seems like a solvable solution if you're talking about digitization and modernization.
Yeah, and I think this, let's just say we keep a paper copy and we believe that's according to statute. I'd have to look up the specific statute to find out if you could digitize and keep the digital record of the grand list. I haven't seen that change, so
We can look into that, thanks.
yeah.
Wondering about your example of a farm where you have an Airbnb on it, because that use of the property does change then, right?
If I'll give an example of a farm that was just sold to the Vermont Land Trust a few years ago. That is only a farm building. There's a barn on it with a couple other farm buildings, no dwelling on the property. If somebody were to pull in and put a travel trailer or a tiny home on that property, it wouldn't change the use of the property. That property would still be used as the highest and best use as a farm because of the large structures, because of the soil types, where it is, and where it's located in town. I'm thinking the property I'm thinking of is on Pine Island, down off Mallets Bay Avenue. But if someone were to put a tiny home, that wouldn't change and rent it out as a short-term rental. That wouldn't change the use of the property. It would still be farm property. I do know that if you were to have it in current use, you would have to withdraw probably the 2 acres around that
Yeah.
tiny home. Yep.
Thank you, Robert.
Jerry, if I could you go over one more time? I didn't quite understand your explanation. I know when it comes to individuals that have multiple lots, deeded lots, we combine them. We use a calculated weight average. If some of the lots are a lot poorer than the original lot, one span number. And so we combine all that acreage. So they may have, 5-10 acre lots, but it's in our grand list, it's 50 acres. And the way we assesses it at that calculated grade. What are you suggesting as far as keeping those 5 lots separate? Or I guess I don't quite understand. And we are talking about those lots that are hidden in our grand list, bringing those forward.
Yeah. So right now, if you have 5 lots that are deeded separately, 10-acre lots, 50 acres, that is one span number, one grand list entry. The way they're typically assessed would be you're going to assess each lot as if it were separate, and then you would reduce the value based on the number of parcels and the holding cost and any infrastructure costs, as well as what you call a developer's discount, or what the profit is if that person were to sell it to a developer. So for instance, one 10-acre lot could be $100,000, and you got 5 of them. that'd be $500,000 on an open market if they were sold separately. But because we have to assess them as if they're sold as one, being one parcel, we reduce the value based on what the holding cost is for selling those 5 properties, what a developer who would buy those 5 properties together, and what their profit would be as they would want to make when they sell the property. So you may have $100,000 value on each lot, but they may only be listed at $60,000 a lot, given all the other costs to the developer. So if you do them separately, you're still assessing them at that 60,000, but at least when they do sell, you don't have to send out a new tax bill. You don't have to make any adjustments for the next year. People aren't calling you, asking you to adjust their tax bill. I can just tell you that when a developer sells a lot, they call the town clerk or the town treasurer or the assessor's office, and they ask what the taxes are on that one lot, and then they want you to prorate it. So if they sell that lot in November, they're responsible for the taxes up to November, but then they want you to give a value or what they wouldn't pay in taxes from November on that one lot. And so you have to do that calculation for them. They sell 2 of the 5 lots, the one in November, and then they sell another one in December. You have to prorate that second lot from December for them. You don't have, technically you don't have to. They should be doing that on their own, but they do call. It creates a lot of confusion. Then you have the property person buying the property calling, asking to make sure that the developer's proration was accurate. It does create a lot of confusion. If you have those lots listed separately, it makes it much easier for the town, much easier for the developer to actually get those tax bills out correctly and to distribute the taxes.
Thank you. And if I can just say, Madam Chair, and we may be doing it wrong, but ever since I've been doing it, what we do is if they're contiguous parcels owned by the same individual, then we include, if it's a 50-acre parcel, combining those 5 10-acre parcels, we will use the 50-acre land schedule to assess that property. So that's a little bit different than what's explained here, quite a bit different, because the huge difference for the 5-acre, 50-acre at the 50-acre schedule. So anyway, that's, and then if it so happens that, and they can easily sell one of those because it's deeded separate, but it's still under their name. If there's one little difference that, the wife's name is not on one and all that, then we have to keep it separate. But again, so we have to go through all the work afterwards to figure out how much that 10 acres is that they're trying to sell. So that's a difference there too. So
I think those are good questions to ask Jill next time she comes in and have a conversation about, maybe in the context of the couple changes that we have in miscellaneous tax, but less about this language.
great. The other thing, while I'm just thinking about it too, and maybe this would be good to hear Mr. Vickery too, but I know a lot of times when assessors come into our town and want to reassess, let's say it is a 10-acre empty miscellaneous parcel. They want to put a 2-acre value on it, beforehand, and we haven't allowed them to do that, and maybe that's, another issue, but I'd be interested if you folks do that as well. If there's a vacant lot and you consider that it could possibly be a building lot, do you include a 2-acre building site on it?
Yeah, we assume that all property is buildable. So unless it can be proven otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And these also all seem like important questions in the regional assessment district context as well. Thank you so much for your testimony today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Kill for 50 lot subdivision.
Sorry.
We would kill for 50 lot subdivision, just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
think we have Peter and then Julie. Does that work for you too? Okay, great. And you just moved because of vibes, or do you have to go? Okay. Okay, great.
Great. Well, thank you for having me back today. Peter Tucker, I'm the Director of Advocacy and Public Policy for the Vermont Association of Realtors. And, every time I see Representative Kimball, I think back 40 years ago when I moved to Vermont with 4 little kids to be in the ski areas. I was a sales rep for different ski companies for 20 some odd years. Then went into real estate, sold real estate primarily in ski resorts and that sort of thing. And I say that just so you understand why I'm so attached to the second home marketplace, and really recognizing the economic value they bring to the state of Vermont. So I have some bias, but at the same time, we work with a government affairs committee that represent different realtor associations around the state. And I can tell you that universally, we are all in locksteps in terms of our opinion on the benefit of second homes to the state of Vermont, and kind of what they bring to us. Even before then, way back at some point, I probably in business school, picked up a book called The Wealth of Nations. It was produced in 1776. The author was Adam Smith. I don't think they had economists in that day and age because he was a Scottish professor of moral philosophy. But you remember certain things out of like a 500-page book. I've read it a few times now. But the thing that has always stuck with me is kind of his story of the pin factory. And the Scottish and the British in the 1700s said we should not have to buy champagne from France. We should just grow our own grapes and make our own champagne. Problem was, none of those islands are really very conducive to growing grapes for champagne. Smith's point was that while they're really not really a great place to grow champagne grapes, the British did have this knack for building pins, and they could build more pins faster than anybody else. And his point was, do what you do best. When I look at the second home industry, the outdoor recreation industry in the state of Vermont, that's our pin factory. We do nothing better than have all the natural resources of the state of Vermont, attracting tourists and outdoor recreation to our state. I was in Denver a couple of years ago at a housing conference, and they had the mayor of Denver gave a speech to us. And he said, look, we sell lifestyle. We attract all kinds of employees to our state who value our outdoor recreation. They want to be here. They want to live here because while they will work, they also will be, close to the things that they really, truly value, the mountains and that lifestyle. We can do that in Vermont. And we are so attractive when it comes to those natural resources. I don't know that we take full advantage of it. The vitality of Vermont's economy is driven by the outdoor recreation industry and tourism. Every second homeowner starts out as a tourist. They come here, I can't say everyone, but certainly the vast majority come here, visit the state, enjoy our natural resources. They come to ski, whatever. And then they decide, hey, this is a place that I want to come to more often, and I want to own a property here, and they make that investment in Vermont. They pay property taxes. They hire Vermont-based property managers to plow the driveways, mow the lawns, provide maintenance and upkeep to their properties when they aren't here. These Vermont property managers employ Vermont workers. They engage with, the landowner, property owners engage with Vermont contractors to make improvements to their properties. And those contractors are all Vermont-based with Vermont employees. They support the outdoor industry, purchasing equipment. From my point of perspective, because I'm a real avid skier, they purchase a heck of a lot of ski passes They purchase groceries, gas, anything else they need while they're here in residence. They support the food and beverage industry, generating great tax revenue. And if you're ever in Killington on a Saturday, you watch the bar, every $14 beer generates $1.40 in tax revenue to the state. And it's not insignificant. It's pretty amazing. Many second homeowners utilize their homes to generate some rental income to help them carry their cost of ownership. I've worked with many over the years that calculus is really what gives them the confidence to be able to purchase a property here. If second homeowners rent on a short-term basis, they provide significant rooms tax revenue to the state, plus the 3% surcharge that was just imposed recently. They employ local cleaning and management services to support their rental property. Okay, and now if I can do this correctly, sharing is not turned on. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and so I wanted to take a look at Act 73 and also some information from the excellent report that Mr. Feldman created from the tax department. I've read it several times and
It's a really good report, isn't it?
pardon
It's a really good report.
Excellent,
Yeah,
excellent.
that's from you.
Are we there? Okay, good. So, first things first. Oh, I gotta move these guys somewhere, or I won't be able to see. There we go. Act 73, you asked the tax department to recommend a multiplier set that would ensure any new tax revenue derived from the non-homestead residential classification would cover the cost of cost to the education fund created by the homestead property tax exemption, right? That was the charge. Did an excellent job of reviewing that. And then, so then I took a look at the tax classification or the homestead property tax exemptions, and here they are. Under $40,000, you would get a 90% credit on your property tax. And it goes down to 115,000, having the lowest credit. And then this is the chart. Sorry, I copied and had to kind of get it lined up again.
I'm just making my math face. It's not about you.
Okay.
So, you know.
Wait till I get to my math, because I did my math at home before I came, so I didn't have to do it on the fly. Hopefully, I don't have to do it on the fly. So Mr. Feldman, when he made the presentation, used set 1B as an example. There's all these different kind of rate per 100 of equalized property value. But I just tried to stay with that just because it's the example that had been used previously. So then I looked at a property taxpayer of a homestead property. Somebody who, earns $39,999, is in that, gets a 90% property tax exemption. So, keep trying to keep the property values equal. I use $200,000. If that is the case and they get a 90% exemption, then their taxable value is $20,000. Back up to the chart above, their rate would be 1.2 per 100. So when you do all the calculation, work that out, their property tax would be $240 on their home because they're getting a 90% exemption. It's a big one. For that same second home owner, let's see, is this? Oh, it's not on yours. Okay, good. All the names of everybody on the screen is here blocking things for me, but
Yeah, sorry that happened.
it doesn't show up for you guys. So for residential non-homestead, a second home, $200,000 value. If I use that tax set 1B, their multiplier is 1.96. Once again, it's per 100. So you divide by 100, multiply by 1.96, and their property tax bill is $3,920. Let me just get this guy out of the way. So, in my head, doing the math, I say the homestead property tax is $240, the non-homestead property tax, $3,920. When you divide that, it's 16 times greater, the second home tax. than that base property taxpayer in residential property taxpayer in Vermont. Just doesn't seem fair. Yeah. When property taxes increase, property owners reduce spending. They'll cut their lawn once a month, put off improvements, and reallocate resources so they can pay their property taxes. Increases in property taxes eventually have a negative impact on property values. Not right away, but eventually owners will sell at a discount based on the increase in their taxes. This not only impacts second home prices, but the entire marketplace. When property values decline, grand list values decline, leading to a reduced tax base. And then all taxpayers that remain will have to pay more to make up the difference. Second homeowners receive virtually no benefit from our public education system. Yet if enacted, this proposal will significantly increase their property tax over the residential rate. Our hope is that this committee will find a path that's fair to all property taxpayers. And, I mean, we certainly have voters in your communities who are residents, but in your community, you have all taxpayers. And I think that being respectful of all of those taxpayers is important. And then, really the fairest tax policy assesses the smallest incremental tax increase across the broadest base of taxpayers. And we're hopeful that the committee, as you work through all of this, will be able to find a way to be fair to all those taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, good.
Representative Bodie.
Thanks. Do you have data that shows the income levels of taxpayers, the different income levels of taxpayers who own second homes?
Income, well, with
$40,000 income a year.
that, well, that's for the resident, I just picked that residential category for the analysis. For the non-resident, you're asking for the second homeowner, right? Yeah, I mean, they don't pay income taxes here, so there's really not a great way to look at that. Does remind me of just one other point, and that is that while I use $200,000 for a homestead property and $200,000 for a non-homestead residential property, a second home, if I did go into the market and really look at what is the median home price of a second home versus the median home price of a primary home, the second home obviously would have a much higher value. So, well, I'm saying this is already 16 times greater than what that second home taxpayer would pay. If their assessed value is much higher, the number gets even broader over time. But I wanted to use apples and apples, so yeah.
Just curious, do we know how many second homeowners are actually Vermonters?
I don't, but they're in, I think that, second homeowners, well, and, if they're.
Say Vermonters live here.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, just thinking about it, certainly seasonal properties that.
We're not talking about seasonal.
Right, I know, but, I think that would be the biggest chunk.
Yes.
The next, there would be some Vermonters who have said, look, I'll buy a second home so that I can rent it, so that I can generate income. I don't think that's,
Also family visitors.
right, exactly, yeah. But yeah, I think that, the majority of second homeowners are from out of state. I mean, that's, really.
Majority
you.
of second homeowners are people who are residents of Vermont.
No, he said the opposite.
Are from out of state. I'm sorry. Yeah, no question.
We have a number of communities in which the tax rate for primary for residents is higher than it is for second homes. And that is, I recognize the theory behind why the system was set up that way, but most find that unconscionable.
Well, I guess I don't really understand the theory of why it's set up that way, but I do think that, that's, I mean, if you want to fix tax policy, maybe that'd be a good place to start.
And then just. Sorry.
That's exactly what we're doing. That's what we're trying to do.
Right.
Just in your example, you use the most generous exemption for the value on there, 90%.
Mhm.
I think in most cases, if you really look at going over the 115 in income and then compare that to a second homeowner, then that's probably a better comparison.
More equitable or comparable, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
everyone's talking and only one person can talk for any of this to work. Thank you. Okay, great. Representative Maslin.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So two different directions here. One, thank you very much for your homework. I'll need to study it because it's very, very helpful to us to work through your examples and see where we are.
Mhm.
But I disagree with where you started out. What you do, I agree with many things in between. You seem to start out, do what we do best, which is build second homes. I'm being a little
Oh, I see.
flip with your words, I guess, or something like that.
Mhm.
But I'm also, I grew up here, essentially, across the river, but here. And I recognize we have limited resources to make available. And I'll say, be sarcastic, for other people. And so, I thank you again for your homework. But where you're headed, doesn't make me feel good about what we're trying to do on balance. We've got a lot of work to do, as we've recognized, and I'll just stop there.
Okay.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll see you tomorrow too. Who knows?
We gotta figure out how to get out of this thing now.
Julie, do you want to join us?
Yes.
Thank you.
Richard, what is it about?
So sorry. Do you need some? Oh, you have water. Okay.
I'm quite a little old school and I have a handout.
I would love if you sent them to Sorsha for us.
I can definitely.
Okay, great. And I'll give the handouts to Sorsha. Thanks.
I know it can be helpful to have numbers written down and in front of you rather than hearing them.
I think people, did you submit them to Sorsha already?
No.
Oh, okay.
This is all there is.
Okay.
I won't.
They're just one
Right.
pagers.
No, we just, we try to be a non-paper committee whenever possible, but thank you. Thank you. Sorry, Sorsha. Also, while we're handing stuff out, NCSL dropped off pens and a bunch of other goodies for everyone and they're, if you want them later.
Yeah, thanks. All right, well, thank you. Afternoon, Chair Kornheiser, thank you for bringing me in today. For the record, my name is Julie Marks. I am the founder and the executive director of the Vermont Short-Term Rental Alliance. We are an association that represents over 300 due-paying members, representing hundreds of homeowners and property managers across Vermont. So I am here truly representing members from every single county in the state, across a wide income spectrum, from both sides of the aisle, and from people who vote here and people who don't vote here. A big portion of our membership is these local property management companies who employ hundreds of Vermonters to take care of vacation rental homes and manage the rentals, as well as farm stay hosts, which has been a subject of conversation here this afternoon so far. And then both residents and non-residents who enjoy renting out their properties to visitors. I want to start by just sharing a little bit about the vacation rental market, which has been really rather unstable in the past couple of years. Things happen, and the market is really sensitive to a lot of external factors, such as the economy. We've seen huge disruption in travel and tourism in Vermont in the past year. Climate-related disasters can suddenly make a property uninhabitable. I guess my point is that a home that's fully booked as a vacation rental 1 year, maybe go to personal use or long-term rental the next. And there's a lot of change and variability in the use of a property that engages in the vacation rental activity for that very nature and purpose of flexibility. So as it was kind of mentioned earlier, because property use can change quickly or from year to year, we are wondering what mechanism will be in place to allow for owners to clearly appeal or revise a designated tax classification if the use changes. But additionally, I've got basically three main requests or comments to make regarding to the bill. I also was only aware of version 2.1 coming into this. So my comments are based on that version.
That's perfect.
The first, so I'll go through them high level and then revisit.
Okay, thanks. And we
Why?
won't interrupt you because we've lost our interruption today. I've lost my own interruption, right? Yeah.
So first off, you know, from the perspective of our members who are residents here in Vermont, and have a homestead and are operating a short-term rental on their homestead property, we feel that homestead properties should be taxed as homesteads in full and not portioned out. The reason that homesteaders often offer rentals on their property is to supplement the property taxes. And so adding to the cost of owning and living in Vermont feels counterintuitive in the pursuit of affordability. Secondly, from the perspective of our non-homestead properties, we recognize the desire to bring online more workforce housing. So we would recommend the committee include a 3 consecutive month rental period that would qualify non-residentials into that, or sorry, non-homesteads into the non-residential category. And then lastly, from the perspective of our non-resident homeowners, we're asking for consideration around the property's overall economic contribution to the communities through the generation of meals and rooms tax, visitor spending, et cetera, before it be considered or taxed as otherwise vacant or underutilized. So going back to the homesteads, again, the perspective from our primary resident members, this really feels kind of punitive. And this is current tax policy already. And I'm not exactly sure when it changed, but I did notice a couple years ago, my tax bill go up based on a prorated rental activity from the accessory dwelling building that we built on our property. My husband and I have been renting a guest suite in our house since 2018. And the reason that we started doing so was to pay our property taxes. So for us, you know, we started doing out of necessity, it turned into something we really loved. And that motivated us to convert kind of an old falling down shed on our property into a 700 square foot mother-in-law. The plan was pretty simple. We designed it so that it could be accessible to one of our aging parents if we needed to house them and take care of them in the future. But in the meantime, we could pay back the investment through rental activity over the next 10 years. However, 5 years later, that 10-year plan has just become a real big risk and uncertainty for us. So again, adding to our property tax bill doesn't improve our affordability, nor does it encourage us to stay. And my personal situation is certainly not unique. In the handout, you'll see, and this might be, Peter and I could maybe go back and forth on the data, but from our intel and what we see, we expect that about 50% of Vermont short-term rentals are owned by Vermonters. And many have created accessory units or have started renting out rooms in order to afford to stay here. So if a property is a homestead, we ask that it be taxed as a homestead in full, regardless of any on-site rental activity. And so we would respectfully request that the language be revised to reflect that. Regarding non-homestead properties, again, if the intent is to encourage underused second homes to contribute to workforce housing supply, the definition of long-term rental here could reflect the modern tenant and the current demands for that type of housing. So while this is technically a little a bit outside of our jurisdiction, since we focus on short-term rentals, but 80% of short-term rental hosts also offer medium-term rentals. And this is not a legally defined term, but medium term in the industry or in the market tends to be 1 to 3 months rentals at a time. This has been
I'm sort of like I'm interrupting, but like the travel nurses instead
the
of.
travel nurses, the professional laborers who are on contract, you know, when FEMA came for 6 weeks, et cetera. We have remote working is huge. We see this demand highly for people who are relocating to the state. They're looking for rentals, furnished rentals for a couple of months at a time. So while they technically fall under landlord tenant, they function more like a vacation rental because of the expectation that they're furnished, the owner covers all the utilities, and it's for an even shorter kind of seasonal period of time. But it is a high demand need for housing. So we think that if you include a 3 consecutive month definition to the long-term rental, you might encourage some folks to maintain that. And finally, I want to acknowledge the perspective of our second homeowners who do rent their properties. We don't represent second homeowners who don't rent their properties. As you can see in the handout, there are about 50,000 second homes. And that's about 15% of our housing, but short-term rentals are 3 to 4% of our housing. And again, that's split across homestead and non-homestead. So these homes that are shared regularly contribute greatly to our state economy, our education budget. As Peter mentioned, vacation rentals now pay 12% meals and rooms tax instead compared to hotels that only pay 9%. And they support local jobs, including the more than 100 local property management businesses that are based here in Vermont and employing Vermonters. So they are occupied, they're contributing and supporting local livelihoods. So we just asked, is it fair to classify those properties that are generating economic activity for our communities as vacant? Those are our primary concerns. But I guess my final comment, which is kind of when we look at this bill in consideration with all the other policy initiatives that are on the table right now, the objective feels a little unclear. I can't really tell if the goal is to raise revenue or if it's to influence the real estate market. I think second home properties, as Peter mentioned as well, contribute so much funding for our education while contributing nothing to the cost of it. They're not putting those kids in the school system. Does the math work if we were to flip the equation? So again, as an association, we're primarily concerned with property rights, affordability, and enabling economic opportunity. We'd love to support this bill if our requested changes can be made.
Thank you. I really appreciate how clear and actionable your concerns and suggestions are. Thank you so much for that. That's like really a gift these days. Sure. Any questions or thoughts for me?
Just one. All right.
No,
Thinking about the new system where you try to a dwelling use attestation form, which we have to change the name of. Yeah,
No.
so, yeah. But
You just really hurt Jake's feelings.
he's okay. But with that, it assumes that you can predict how you're going to use the property in the coming year. With your example of 3-month rentals to employees that have a need for a short-term, medium term, as you said, how predictable is it for you? And looking at predicting who's going to occupy that space for what period of time?
For me, in my personal example, so we have our ADU in our home that is available in that medium-term rental market. We have guests through the end of this month and the rest of the calendar is empty. And that is just the state of the rental market right now, we are seeing really only last minute bookings for short-term and medium-term travel. So it's really hard to predict. It won't be empty the whole year. I guarantee that, but I do not know what it's going to look like in terms of the division of those monthly rentals versus those week-long rentals. Every year it kind of plays out differently. Some years it's rented more in the medium term than the short term, and sometimes in reverse. And so it's really just market dependent. It's hard to predict.
But thank you for that. And your other example was somebody rents for 3 months. So you could have somebody renting your accessory dwelling unit as a vacation home for 3 months versus as a place where they're living as a permanent resident type of thing.
Yeah, it happens both ways. We, last summer, we had an elderly couple living there for 3 months over the summer, and at the end of it, they left because they had decided to buy their own house. So they weren't working, they're retired, but we've seen it all. Yeah, every scenario.
Just trying to think about how it all fixes in. And your example of your tax bill going up, is that because of the value that you invested in the property and then a portion of it was?
I'm not sure. It says rental
Yeah,
to like 20% or something.
so yeah, okay, right. Thank you, yeah. I know it's weedy technical questions, but.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Chris, I think we're gonna give it a go, if that's okay with you. Okay, our I didn't lose anyone for this last, for tax classifications. We've gotten to everyone. Okay, great. There are sort of people from yesterday's testimony block that are coming today, and then all kinds of things, but we also have a budget letter that we want to send to appropriations. So we're squeezing Chris in. It's very possible we won't finish the conversation, but we're going to give it a go without Jim, and that'll be okay.
Be right back.
Okay. Just teasing you, Jim.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen most of this language, but Chris will take us through it.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Chris from JFO. Sorsha was kind enough to post a document under my name today that I'm going to share and walk you through. It feels like it was like 6 months ago at this point, but it was only last Thursday that I was here talking to you about some of the language in the governor's recommended budget for FY 27. Yeah, that looks legible, right? Can everybody see that? Sweet. So I attempted, like I have in past years, to take the conversation from last week when we went through that big chart of all the different sections of language that were relevant to this committee's jurisdiction, and attempted to start a process with your chair of putting words to paper to give you all something to react to. These are certainly not my words or my thoughts. I don't speak on behalf of the committee. I am just trying to facilitate this process for you all. So the letter, or the memo rather, which the Appropriations Committee is hoping all the committees will send to them by tomorrow, kicks off very similarly as last year with pleasantries and platitudes at the beginning, and then some comments on the proposed appropriations. And then on the next page, I have some specific comments here about language sections. So if anything here is not clear, or if it's not capturing the committee's intent, we should talk about that. So I just want to go through this and give you a sense of what's here. So the first item here, again, we're just looking at the proposed appropriations, the base appropriations. So it's the appropriations to the tax department, and all of the property tax relief programs and the pilot payments are all included in this one bullet. I didn't hear anybody in the committee raise any really specific thoughts. So this language speaks to
And folks, sorry, I should have said this at the beginning, sorry to interrupt, because every committee does this differently. A few years ago, the previous chair actually just read the letter, and I don't even know if the rest of the committee saw it. It's like not that long ago. So times change. And then some committees like sort of straw poll and wordsmith every section of it and then vote the whole thing. Some committees do it as an FYI, some committees straw poll, and then if it's a mixed vote, it's like noted on the thing. Some committees have a spreadsheet, some don't. I think what I'll say is if anyone has a big pushback on one suggestion, we can note it on the letter, but we don't need to make a formal process of this. Back to you, Chris.
All right. So are there any questions on the first item, the base appropriations? All right. The second item here is a request for an appropriation. Those of you who were on the committee last year will remember the volunteer income tax assistance program that is funded through a contract that is managed by the Office of the State Treasurer. This is the program that helps income qualified taxpayers file their taxes and take advantage of the various credits and benefits that the tax code provides them. There's $400,000 in the treasurer's base budget to support this program. Last year, you all had requested an increase in base funding of $148,000. The budget approved that $148,000 increase, but as a one-time, not as a base increase. So this paragraph contemplates requesting an increase in the base funding by $150,000 to bring the program to a total of $550,000.
We're not suggesting where it should come from.
It comes from the general fund.
There's something to figure out there.
We bring the money in.
That makes sense for everybody?
Okay.
Fair enough. The next item on the top of page 2 is, I don't know if you all know this, but every 10 years, JFO does a comprehensive deep dive of Vermont's tax structure. It's called the 10-year tax study.
And it's so good.
It is very thorough, and it's a huge lift for our office to do. And the last time we did it was approximately 9 years ago. So if you are wondering how we plan to spend our off session in JFO this year, this is going to be the major focus. So the upcoming 10-year tax study would be due next January. And in the past, we have used some third-party consultant support to help us with this effort because it is a huge lift and we only do it every 10 years. So the request here would be for a one-time appropriation of $100,000 to JFO to fund that consulting and analytical support as needed.
And we would put the actual language for the tax study, the miscellaneous tax bill, and haven't done that yet.
Just a question about what that will involve. Will this also include some analysis of tax lists? And will there be a parallel investment in benefits?
Do you know how much we spent last time? Anyone?
It was
a very different staffing structure at JFO.
Yes, it was a little less than this, but we had a different staffing structure. We had a data analyst who then moved on to the tax department, who was doing a lot of this work at a rate that we probably would not be able to hire someone with similar skills at. We had an accounting firm hired to run some sample returns for different family configurations. We also hired people to help us with graphic design and layout and editing and things like that. It is a very, very big project for our office to do. And we also had Joyce doing a lot of the work. And that was one of her first really deep dive projects. And we asked if Joyce was willing to do this. She was not as excited to talk about this project as I'm excited to talk about it. So I wish her well in her retirement. She continues to be an amazing resource for us.
Yeah. Does the study look at ways in which the tax structure could be improved, or is it just an analysis of what it is now?
Sometimes it does. Every time we've done this, I went back 30 years and found the last 3. And the charge of the study is a little bit different each time.
And folks, we can talk about the charge in the miscellaneous tax bill. This is just a paperwork.
Okay.
It's not to conflate it with the tax structure commission.
Totally different. Totally separate. This is a big part of these studies in the past have been a 50-state comparison, and it really looks at like everything and like how do we compare to not only neighboring states but the nation as a whole, who pays tax incidents, things of that nature. But
and sorry, no technical, but this bullet is not on the document that we have. Here, so I don't know if we're looking at something.
It
We
might
have the healthcare
be.
IT fund.
Sorsha, could you post the version that I sent like 2 hours ago? The 10-year text study was not on the version this morning, and I was like, oh, should that be on here? And then I put it on here, so there'll be a revised version posted.
Yeah, and like, I don't have big
That's all right.
feelings about that. I was just.
Thank you for flagging that.
Anytime.
Okay, so that's the appropriation section. Now I'm switching over to the sections around language and policy in the bill that were within the committee's jurisdiction and that House Approps had asked you all to take a look at. So the first one speaks to the appropriation in the tax department's budget that funds the grand list maintenance, litigation assistance, reappraisal, things of that nature, the $3.41 million line item that the FY26 BAA and the FY27 GovRec proposed funding out of the pilot fund. So the committee's comfortable with that commentary. We can continue moving.
I just guess I need a little more explanation as to why would we be holding off? But you're saying that approach is not including that currently in there?
Approps has included this construct in the 26 BAA.
Yeah.
But that was the first time.
That was the first time. So the governor is proposing this construct in the FY27 GovRec. That was really the first time it was proposed. The BAA began the concept in the current fiscal year. So this is speaking to whether or not that construct should continue in FY27 and beyond by funding those costs out of the pilot fund.
And so the caution is about the fact that like the pilot fund is sort of a contentious topic these days, so we're adding caution.
All right. The next item speaks to the $114.9 million general fund transfer to the Ed Fund. So to refresh everyone's memory, 10 million of this $114.9 million total was intended to offset the impact of shifting $10 million of purchase and use tax revenue out of the Ed Fund and into the T Fund. The other $104.9 million would be buying down rates. So take a look at this verbiage and let me know.
Yeah, I'm not supportive of that.
Okay. Which one? I'm so sorry, I walked away for a second.
Okay. Is that specifically about the 10 million with the purchase and use tax?
Right, I mean, why- what's that?
We still get the 10 million.
But from where?
Wait, just Mark, you're okay with the first paragraph and not the second paragraph?
Right.
Okay. And so for the second paragraph, it's that instead of moving $10 million to the education fund from the general fund and then moving 10 million, that same $10 million from the education fund to the transportation fund, we're saying, let's just move the $10 million directly from the general fund to the transportation fund instead of stopping off in a third fund for 45 seconds.
I just know, I thought there was at some point some talk about backfilling that into the Ed Fund with some more general fund money.
Yeah, that was, so the governor's proposal was to move the money from the Ed Fund to the transportation fund and cover that money taken out of the education fund by the general fund. And so this is still moving $10 million out of the general fund and $10 million into the transportation fund. It's just saying, why are we stopping off in the education fund?
We're still losing $10 million in the education fund.
Nope. No, so in both scenarios, the education fund was going to be whole, seems like a ridiculous statement for the education fund.
Okay,
But it's just that it's not doing a little loop-de-loop.
okay, it's coming to me now. Thanks.
Okay, but like, yes, the transportation fund needs money. And, yeah.
Thanks.
All right, the next item speaks to the Health IT Fund. This essentially just says, instead of putting this tax provision in the big bill, the committee would prefer to put it in a separate bill related to tax policy.
And it's in our miscellaneous tax bill right now. It's just like, please don't put tax policy in the big bill because it's ours.
E516 and 516.1 relate to the purchase and use tax, and this sort of dovetails into what we were just talking about. We could just let everybody read it.
So welcome.
It's Representative Brannigan and the, doesn't really matter, but I'm just curious about the choice of the last sentence, which implies a policy decision. But at a future time. And I just wonder if you err on the side of parsimony in a letter like.
I guess this is the place that I probably wouldn't approve of. And this is basically saying that we aren't gonna go forward with the $10 million every year for next 4
Okay,
years after this, correct?
yes.
Okay, so
Okay, so this is where your disagreement is. What?
Were you asking if that language, it will be in this? Are you?
my understanding of this language here is we don't approve of the recommendation to have $10 million a year for the next 5 years taken out of the ed fund and put back in the transportation fund.
Yes, this disagrees with that notion and saying that we should stabilize the education fund before we start doing other things.
I don't agree with that.
Great.
I think it
Okay.
should.
Appreciate
the
that.
Transportation on the fund because of the match money that's possible.
Yeah. Totally makes sense. Anyone else? Okay.
All right. Next section has to do with the estate tax, because we continue to talk about the estate tax this year. You all will remember that the GovRec proposes shifting excess estate tax revenue out of the higher ed trust fund and into the school construction aid special fund. You also likely remember hearing testimony that those windfalls do not show up every year. They do not show up most years. It is in fact unpredictable when they do show up, and when they do, how much. So this language essentially says, due to that variability, school construction giving, as important as it is, perhaps needs a more sustainable funding commitment.
And I guess on that one, have we really heard enough testimony in regards to that? I mean,
I feel like we have, but if you don't feel like we can bring in more people.
so what was the amount of money that was maybe even projected to go into that a year?
We have no way of predicting it.
We can't project it, because what triggers, and that's a great question, what triggers this is you have to have estate tax collections that exceed 125% of the January revenue forecast. So we inherently can't predict when that happens. And when you go back and look at the higher ed trust fund, and their annual report from 1999 to the present, there were only like 2 years in the last 10 years where anything substantive materialized from this into the higher ed trust fund. Yeah. That's a great way to describe it. Lumpy and inconsistent at best.
At best. I like sporadic and highly variable and difficult. Nah.
It's really 313.
I'm so sorry to the A&R team. Thank you.
We're on the last piece here.
I know, but we still have VLCT.
Ah.
Yes, Jim.
As a still trustee until the 1st of March of the state colleges, I'd be in favor of not moving money, even on an unpredictable, whatever it is. The state colleges need as much scholarship money as they can avail themselves of it. Workforce development is as much a part and parcel of advancing our economy as anything else we do. So that's my 10 cents for that.
Thank you.
All right, so there's one more item on here, and it's probably the most controversial one you'll ever debate. The transportation fund interest provision. The language in the GovRec had proposed that the T fund keep interest earned on the T fund. When we looked under the hood at this a little bit with some folks in the administration and the treasurer's office, we realized that if this proposal were to go live for fiscal year 27, it would have an adverse impact to the general fund. And it would be cleaner to, if people agree with this policy shift, to make it effective in FY 28.
Thank you.
And this is not a large amount of money, about $1 million.
Okay, I'm going to note where there was disagreement. And then we'll just sort of send it around to everyone and then send it to APROPS a little bit after that. Thank you. That will happen tomorrow. So if you want to talk to me about anything before tomorrow, please do so. Thank you very much, Chris.
Oh, thank you.
And we are pivoting back to in our brains to yesterday, where we were talking about regional assessment district. And maybe we even talked about regional assessment districts today. No, that was mostly yesterday, right? You're squinting at me, but it was yesterday, right?
Mentioned offhand.
Okay, great. And so the League of Cities and Towns was not available yesterday. They're available today. So we're jumping back into that topic. Hello, Samantha.
Hello, thank you. For the record, my name is Samantha Sheehan, the Municipal Policy and Advocacy Specialist for the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. And thank you for accommodating my schedule so that we could discuss this issue with you. So I'm hoping to be brief. I'll remind folks that VLCT has not adopted a position on the regionalization of property valuation. This affects our member communities in very different ways, and they were unable, or in the wisdom of our members, they chose not to take a position in favor or against the regionalization effort that you've all been working on for several years now. That said, we are happy to contribute expertise and input so that whatever the legislative outcome is most possible to comply with and use at the municipal level. And I participated on the Act 73 stakeholder working group that looked at the question of executing regional appraisal. And I also want to say first that it was a great process. Hopefully you've heard that in prior testimony. The state officials from the Department of Taxes in particular, Jill and Rebecca, facilitated a really good process. And the folks who volunteered their time and expertise on that came up with some really good practical ideas that we hope informs your work on the bill this year. So there's 3 topics of the draft bill that I want to hopefully cover. One is the change from may to shall for intermunicipal cooperation or intermunicipal contracting. The second is the topic of regional BCAs for appeals of property valuation. And then the third is the cost or the per parcel, proposed changes to the per parcel payments to municipalities. So on the subject of intermunicipal agreements, we advise against making this a requirement. And the reason is because the barriers to intermunicipal contracting otherwise in state law in Title 24 have not yet been addressed. So there is an existing municipal authority called the intermunicipal agreement, which is a relatively straightforward process and opportunity for 2 towns to work together to do one thing. And that is what this framework would sort of use to make it possible for municipalities to meet this requirement to joint contract for a reappraisal vendor. However, there's good evidence that there's barriers in the law to actually executing that type of intermunicipal agreement. And I say good evidence because 4 years ago, when about a third of municipalities triggered a reappraisal requirement under the old law, municipalities did not coordinate or enter into joint contracts at that time. Although many small neighboring towns, and in some cases towns that even already share a lister, were sort of forced onto the same reappraisal schedule. And that's because there is a cost and a liability that is borne by the individual municipality in their reappraisal, mass reappraisal and setting of the grand list. They hold those costs and liabilities individually, not through the intermunicipal agreement. And because it's difficult, and because they bear those costs and liabilities individually, they must also have individual enforcement of the contract with the vendor.
Samantha,
Yep.
I was just talking to Tax about this exact problem. And I'm wondering if you have any suggestions of legislative fixes for it.
Yeah. So one is that you would have to enable the municipality to obligate its own future budgets, because the timeline for the reappraisal contract is so long, and the municipal budgets are authorized by the voters. So that's one problem, because like Town A may not want to contract with Town B without knowing that Town B can obligate the money for their share of the contract. So that's the first thing. And then I don't have a specific legislative suggestion, but the second thing is the pain and perjury, the pain and penalty on the lister in the certification of the grand list. The third thing is the date change, which is really good. So that will also help facilitate these type of agreements and cooperations from April 1st to January 1. So it's like time, money, and liability on the town are the three barriers. I also just want to say we do have time to kind of figure that out, and hopefully will, and this will help municipalities coordinate in more effective ways for all sorts of public services.
Yeah.
So if the implementation date stays in 2029, we have time to sort that out, but we would still like in between now and then, just in case, it to say they may cooperate, and we work towards figuring out how they will cooperate in a shared contract.
Anything you could send that approximates legislative language regarding shared contracting, I think would be, because even between now and 2029, it might make a big difference if this was possible.
Okay.
Thank you.
We will work on that.
Feeling very actionable, suggestion oriented this week, and I think it's anyway.
Okay,
you.
I'll move on to appeals. So there are good policy reasons to regionalize appeals, which we acknowledge, and I'm just not going to repeat them. You've heard lots of testimony over many years on why Vermonters may benefit from a regionalized appeal venue for reappraisal. What I want to focus on is like feasibility for that new regional BCA that's envisioned in this law. So so you may remember in my testimony last year, I said, assume a low rate of confidence and a high rate of appeal. And in the stakeholder working group, that theory was broadly held. Like there's broad agreement that there will be a much higher rate of appeal than what we see in other states who have long used regional appraisal and regional appeals systems. And I think so the IAAO, they report in their survey a 1 to 5% first rate of appeal. We know that Vermont municipalities who have done mass reappraisal using some of these new and innovative approaches to reappraisal, such as eliminating site visits, using GIS data, etc., that the real rate of appraisal or the real rate of appeal is much higher. And in Burlington in 2021, it was over 6%. And I was recently talking to a colleague I used to work with in Burlington, and they reminded me of this sort of fun fact, which is that even in situations where the property owner had a downward adjustment on their valuation at their first round of appeal, they still took it to the BCA. So when they met with the employee of the reappraisal firm to say, I don't have 3 bathrooms, I have 2. I don't have a finished basement, it's an unfinished basement, whatever their ground for the appeal was, even when the contracted appraiser lowered their property value, the homeowner still often took the appeal to the BCA. So we're saying a regional appraisal, the point of that, a regional BCA will be a relatively small number of municipal volunteers navigating a relatively high volume of appeals at the regional level, regardless of how the lines are drawn. If we're going for at or around 10,000 parcels, that will be hundreds of appeals that they have to hear. So the bill right now proposes a makeup of that BCA that's basic, as I understand it, please correct me, Madam Chair, if I'm wrong. It's 1 member per municipality and then plus 1 member per 1,000 parcels. There's a second provision that says each appeal hearing will be a panel of 3 members, not from the town where the property appeal is originating from. My recommendation is to not have both of those provisions, because in the to be determined RAD boundary / school district, it will happen many times over throughout the state that there is one very large urban area, urban municipality with other small, lower sized grand list municipalities. So the overall size of the membership of the BCA will be weighted because of the per 1,000 parcel provision. And then the requirement on the sort of minority membership of the BCA, if you want to think about it that way, to hear appeals for that municipality they'll be disproportionately burdened. So the members representing towns with 1,000 parcels or under will be sort of disproportionately obligated in their time to hear appeals for the larger municipality that has more appeals happening at the regional level.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks for that flag.
Cool. Okay. Great. Moving on. So on the cost, sorry, I'm at my friend's apartment using their computer setup and it's very disorienting. Okay.
I was really admiring the kitchen and I'm disappointed it's not yours. So.
Oh yeah, this is the coffee bar. Actually, when I arrived here, they live in New York and they were like, they immediately wanted to talk to me about vacancy rate and second homeowner property tax rates. And I was like, oh my God, can we just order Thai food?
Me too, Samantha, me too.
But it's a hot topic here in Brooklyn. So on the cost of reappraisal and grand list maintenance, you know, I'm going to be honest, I don't have a better idea than what you propose for the compensation for the cost of reappraisal. That I think probably seems workable. And of course, we'll hear right away if it's not. If we hear more feedback, we'll continue to engage the committee and the legislature on that. However, on the per parcel payments for grand list maintenance, I do have some more information for the committee to consider. So, So part of this is confused, right? You know, there's a variety of ways that listers and assessors are compensated in hourly rates or salary or through contracts or not at all. Some listers are totally volunteer and they receive no compensation. So it's hard to understand what the cost of the professional time is for grand list maintenance. However, we can be more specific about the hard cost. So the cost of the Canvas software, the equipment, like time and travel that the listers book, and other hard costs that happen sort of inside of town hall that create the workplace that the listers use to conduct grand list maintenance throughout the year. And so when we went to listers and assessors last year and trying to understand this, what we found was that there's basically a $10,000 floor for the annual cost to a town to just like have a board of listers and to do any grand list maintenance at all.
Samantha, I'm
And
so sorry, I'm like interrupting you and rushing you because we're supposed to be on the floor and I'm really interested in what you're saying. So
okay,
yesterday TAC said they actually think that the 850 that used to be for both things because of inflation would really just cover grand list maintenance. And I hear you're saying we also need some sort of small town minimum.
yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Yep, that's it.
Will you tell us what the number is for the small town minimum? 10,000 a year. Is that what it is?
1,000.
Okay.
Yeah,
great.
and I would say,
Okay.
like, to be fair, you could even 2/3 it because we're a third of that is for the municipal rate.
Okay.
So in the range of 7,500 to 10,000, we think is a reasonable minimum.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, that's all.
Great. Thank you for your time and for your testimony.
Okay, thanks so much.
Take care and we'll see you soon.
Bye. Okay, bye.